Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Confident Hypnotherapist. This week, I'm joined by Cheryl and Larry Elman. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Now, I was saying before to you guys that this is probably the most nervous I've ever been doing a podcast, because when we're talking about legendary surnames within the hypnosis community, we are talking about Elman being possibly one of the most iconic and legendary surnames there is. So the
Well,
opportunity.
I have to tell you, when I first became a hypnotist, I wouldn't go on like in Hypno Thoughts and stuff. I wouldn't go on any of those chat rooms because they'd see my name and then think I knew what I was doing. And I was new. So I was like, okay. I didn't go on any of those for a while, and then Larry's saying is always, well, he still puts his foot in one at a time to get dressed into his pants. He puts his pants on one leg at a time.
Right.
That's it.
This is the thing, today we are talking about the Almond Induction, and I can't begin to imagine how many times you've trained in this, let alone done this induction. Do you remember the first time you did the induction? Can you think that far back?
I can.
What was it like for you learning your father's work way back then
Well,
for the first time?
I had bugged him to teach me to be a hypnotist. I started bugging him when I was about, I guess, 10, and he kept telling me I was too young, and I kept being a pest. And finally, just to shut me up, he walked me over to his hypnosis bookcase. He pulled down a book and he handed it to me and he said, I want you to read this book cover to cover and give me a written report. Now, you say that to any 10-year-old. What are you going to hear back? Oh, Dad! So I replied that way, and he said, no, if you want me to teach you, you've got to do what I say. So I read it cover to cover, wrote the report, brought it back to him. Took a while. Got there, he walked me back to the bookcase, handed me another book, and he said, you're lucky. In this one, you only have to give me a report on chapters 5 and 6. Now, why, at my age, I can still remember which chapters, I don't know, but I can.
It's significant, yeah.
Yeah, so I did that. Then he hit me with a third one. Along about the fourth or fifth book, I asked him why. And he said, well, Larry, all of my students are physicians. All of them are doctors or dentists. You're going to be the only person in the room who isn't. And I want you having enough background so you don't make a fool of yourself. And I also want you to just plain shut up. Of course, he must have known that that last idea was totally unobtainable, but he threw it in anyway. So I went through the course, and my first induction was early on the very first lesson of what's a 3-month-long course. And I simply followed instructions. I did, I'm sure, a very poor job at it. And at that point, I was more concerned with learning the mechanics than I was with understanding them, which is why when I took the course a second and eventually a third time, I learned more than I did the first time. The first time I got the mechanics. Doesn't mean I was a hypnotist. Second time I got a bit of the theory, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I can remember my first time. It was halting and it was bad, and whatever, which in a way has paid off because when I teach today, I have a lot more empathy and patience with the student than many instructors do.
Much better than me. He is. He's really good at giving feedback and stuff. Very good at it.
And this is the, because I know for me personally, I believe the Almond Induction is possibly the most essential induction to have in your toolbox. When you look at this induction, it is really a beautiful series of skill building tests that have a pass or a failed aspect to it that really allow for a very quick and easy way into generating hypnotic phenomena, which is brilliant. But I also feel that because of the fact that it is very direct, that this can often be one of the things that scares a lot of newer hypnotists into fully embracing it or fully learning it. Is that something that you've experienced in your teaching of it over time?
So it's interesting. Number one, it's a process. So we teach all 6 steps of the process. But if you listen to Dave Elman recordings or if you read his book, often you see him doing parts of them strung together. But, in several places, there is the complete, all 6. Well, I think they had 5, and we add an additional deepener, which just helps them. Excuse me, it's too much talking. It helps them to stay in somnambulism. But when you said it's pass fail, it's not really. They don't know the script. They don't know the process, and just don't say oops in the words of their God.
You always said, that's right, you're doing fine.
Right. And
That's right.
And you call them tests.
6 words. Those 6 words should be engraved on the forehead of every hypnotist. That's right, you're doing fine.
Right.
So long as you're saying that, so that they, the subject, remains positive and remains confident, you can go from step to step. And if they fail one, fine. That means you haven't gotten them to the depth you thought you had. You haven't done, not them, it's you. So what you do is you immediately just find a substitute for that and do it again. A slightly different but similar step or test or whatever you want to call it. And if you put that in properly, that second one will work. And by phrasing it the way I've just described, they feel confident and they go into the ones after that, gung-ho and so on and so forth. So
it's basically learning troubleshooting, troubleshooting for each step.
That's exactly it.
Ways of doing it. So I'd be happy to put you through some of those.
Well, that's what I was hoping for today. Yeah, to be able to go through this fantastic induction and to look at what perhaps some of the troubleshooting aspects might be in each part of that.
Sure, we'd be happy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I also want to say, before we get there, is you are calling them tests. So I just want to say, even though they're a test, it's also a convincer.
Yes.
And it's not only
Absolutely
a convincer for the client, it's a convincer for the hypnotist to know where that client is in the process.
Absolutely agree with you.
And so instead of looking at it with fear, look at it with, how many people have gone and done a session with a client and then wondered themselves, were they in hypnosis?
I give a talk, I've given many conferences, where I start the talk by saying, I want a show of hands of the people in the audience. How many of you have had a significant number of people, not just 1 or 2, but a number of people leave your office saying, that was a wonderful, wonderful session, but I don't know if I was hypnotized.
Mm-hmm.
And a whole bunch of hands will go up. Then I'll pause for a second or two, and now I've got another question for you. How many of you use a lot of tests and convincers? Number of hands will go up, and then I'll say to them, have you noticed None of you raised your hands on both questions. Does that tell you something?
And this is the thing. I think it's really about their confidence as a hypnotist to be able to do that, and to suggest that their eyes will just remain shut and remain locked shut and just won't open, and that fear of what if they open their eyes. And
but that's the whole point. If you get the hypnotist knowing that when he uses tests and convincers, first of all, if it doesn't work, he's got a backup plan.
Mhm.
But second of all, that when it works, the person is definitely hooked on hypnotism, and your job in giving suggestions for your change work becomes easier because you know and they know they've been hypnotized.
They've created hypnotic
once
phenomena.
you get that point across, so I enjoy giving that talk on tests and convincers.
Mm.
And if they're a test and they're a convincer, they also become a deepener.
Yes.
So let's look at some of the troubleshooting mechanisms. So the initial one, most people know as eye closure, eye lock.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not about the eyes. It's basically a catalepsy of a group of small muscles. Okay. And so we can use the eyes, but we can use other things too.
Mm.
Sometimes if somebody opens their eyes, they have a fear.
Mm-hmm.
They have a fear of, eyes being closed. They may not know you, and this is their first time. And maybe they have a fear of closing their eyes. You know, it's important to build rapport and get them comfortable. But people that maybe were sexually abused, physically abused as children, don't have a lot of trust. They might have a harder time closing their eyes and being comfortable with it. So, but let's go through a few using the eyes. So in a moment, I'm going to have you take a nice deep breath in. Oh, by the way, I'm going to walk through some of this. So if you're driving and you're an easy subject, you may want to
maybe
not
put this
listen to
podcast aside for a moment.
Yeah. And I was, Larry and I were driving up to, I think it was Jason Linnett's years ago, and we were listening to Dave Elmans' recordings, and Larry was taking notes and taking notes. He hadn't heard them in years. And he kept going over, I think it was lesson 1, where they kept going over and over and over. And Larry kept, back then when you could just rewind the tape kind of thing, he kept going back and listening to it so he could take more notes. And I finally had to say to him, we were stuck in traffic. And instead of taking 3.5 hours to get there, I think we were on hour number 5 and still in traffic. And I finally had to say to Larry, you can't listen to this, go to another lesson. He goes, but I want to go in order. I said, if you continue going in order, we might not be on the road anymore. So yeah, do not use this in a moving vehicle, but it'll be broken up. So take a nice deep breath in. And when you let it out, just close your eyes down. If I'm there with them, I would have them look at my hand, but a lot of times I don't do that anymore on Zoom. And go ahead and relax, close your eyes down, and just relax all the muscles around your eyes, all the little muscles to the point that they just don't want to work. And when you're sure that they just don't want to work, go ahead. Now, you could use the word test them, or you could use the word prove to yourself that they just don't want to work.
Back in the second one better.
Yeah, because if you think about it, back in the days of Dave Elman, tests did not have as much of a negative connotation as it does today in our world. There's drug testing, there's testing to get your jobs, there's testing, IQ testing, there's the end of year testing in all the schools. I mean, so much depends on these tests that people teach to the test. It wasn't like that. You had a quiz around Wednesday on material, and you had a test on Friday, and all those tests got added together, and it was a fraction of your score, not this big, humongous thing. So tests can sometimes be intimidating to people. So prove to yourself that they just don't want to work. And when you're sure they just don't want to work, go ahead and try them. try implies also failure.
Hmm.
And 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 uh you'll find that they're just so relaxed, they're like glued shut, and so, and then they try, and then you can tell them stop testing. Now they're like, ooh, I was testing, I won. I did good. So now they can get that satisfaction, so that could be a word that you could change that would help. Okay, sometimes if they pop their eyes open, I might say to them, and I might demonstrate what it might look like. So I might say to them, go ahead and close your eyes and relaxing all those muscles, and just let them as if they just don't want to work. And when you test them, and then I'm showing them what it must feel like. I know for a fact I can open my eyes, but I really want to do this hypnosis. So it's a consensual state. It's something we're doing together. I have no magic wand.
Mm.
So then I'm giving them an idea of what that might feel like. Imagine that, use the word imagine, picture and imagine that they just won't want to work. And
I
when
know
you're
I've seen Mike Mandel offer the whole fist analogy, which I think is really wonderful. And he does that as part of his rehearsal and creates a yes set out of it as well by asking people if they can imagine the fist being so tight that it just can't get any tighter, and then imagining the opposite of that, which I've always thought was a really wonderful way to introduce that whole idea of that hallucinatory relaxation going on in the eyelids as well.
Right, or doing suggestibility tests just so that, like those magnets that pull the fingers together. So you can always do that, which, wow, you're going to be really good at this. So then you have them do it. You can have them do it that way. For people, sometimes on Zoom, I can't see their eyes. So another thing I've done in the past is, you would put your hand on the desk and relax your fingers to the point they just don't want to work. When you're sure they just don't want to work, go ahead and try lifting it, and you'll find that they just don't want to work. Similar wording, it's like they're stuck, So it's hard because I can't see it necessarily on a table or on their arm or their chair, and I'm working Zoom. So here's something to do for Zoom. Go ahead and put your hand on your cheek. Go ahead, Lawrence, do it. Put your hand on your cheek and relax those fingers. Relax them to the point they just don't want to work. It's as if they're glued, stuck to your cheek. Try to lift them and you find you cannot. And you try to lift them and you cannot, right? And now take that, you can close your eyes, take that feeling of relaxation from the top of your head all the way down to your toes, like a blanket of relaxation. Excellent. So while I've got him here, I'm going to do one of the troubleshooting ones. Since I have him on his cheek, I'm going to say, now in a moment, I'm going to have you be able to lift that hand off that cheek. And yet, when it touches your cheek again, as it pulls it closer to your cheek, you're going to find you go as much as 10 times deeper than you are right now. Go ahead and release that hand from your cheek. And as it pulls right back down to your cheek, you find you go 10 times deeper. Excellent. You're doing great. Now, in a moment, I'm going to have you lift that hand away from your cheek. And when you do, you're going to perhaps as much as double that sense of relaxation. Go ahead and pull your hand from your cheek and notice when it comes back to your cheek, how you go and double where you are right now. You're doing great. Now, in a moment, I'm going to have you pull your hand away from your cheek. And when it comes back to your cheek again, you'll find you can go as deep as you like. Go ahead and release that hand from your cheek. And notice when it comes back and touches your cheek again, how you go as deep as you want. You're doing great. So now you can release your hand from your cheek. Take a nice deep breath in. I'm going to count from 1 to 3, and you're going to come back up so we can talk some more. 1, 2, 3. Go ahead and stretch. Feel the circulation coming back. And what did that feel like to you, Lawrence?
You know, the weird thing was that um, the hand became harder and harder to move from the cheek each time. So I can feel that fractionation effect truly occurring with that. What I also loved about it was that this is a very comfortable position, and I can imagine myself going even more deeply into that experience so much more comfortably because of that resting there. So that was actually
And I saw you as the hypnotist. I saw you sinking into your hand more each time.
There's an interesting point to be made here. And you've seen her use the eye lock. You've now seen her use this. We made the point that we refer to this step as catalepsy of a group of small muscles. When we converted over to calling it that and emphasizing that to our students was shortly after I'd had an exchange of correspondence with an excellent UK hypnotherapist by the name of Barry Thane. Barry had gotten a phone call one day asking if he had an opening at this and this hour because the person was going to be in the area. And if I can get an appointment right then, I'd like to have an appointment. And Barry said yes. The guy hung up. So he has no idea anything beyond this guy is coming at this and this hour. He doesn't know what the guy has a presenting problem. He doesn't know this. He doesn't know that. So he thought ahead and he said, well, I'm going to use the Dave Elman induction. And he's all prepared to do that when, as the man walks in, he sees the man is carrying a white cane with a red tip and tapping it on the floor.
Right.
There goes any idea of using the eyes.
Mm.
So what he did next was he went through his intro and intake portion, trying to find out what the person's habits and interests and hobbies were in order to figure out what group of muscles would have the most emotional meaning for him. I don't remember what group. He told me at the time, he wrote me the thing. I've used his recording of it in class, but I can't remember at this point. But he selected a group of muscles on that basis and then did exactly what she just did with this. Worked perfectly. And we got to talking and said, well, you know, basically, eye closure, eye lock isn't about eye closure, eye lock. It's about bypassing the critical faculty. It's about establishing the initial portion of hypnosis and getting the client to feel enough of the hypnosis so that you can then deepen, you can then add other things. You've got what my father referred to as the opening wedge.
Mm.
So does the opening wedge matter whether you were using the eyes, the cheek on, the hand on the cheek?
Oh, in New
Something
York,
else?
somebody asked me if I could do it with the tongue. And I said, never did it. Let's try. So there I tried it right in the middle and we did the tongue. And I've done it in variations of using the tongue. So that's interesting. So the idea is that you're just doing something with the cat, and whatever you do, you can then switch to, and use with the fractionation, which was that third process step.
Yeah.
The fourth process step, when you're in person, you would use the hand drop, the arm drop, the hand drop. What do you do on Zoom? You know, so the way that would go is, in a moment, I'm going to lift your hand by the wrist, and when I drop it, you're going to go doubling the sense of where you are right now. And you would just go ahead and do it. Now, what do you do if their arm is stiff? What if, you know, and they're helping you? Then you can say, go ahead, just relax it and don't help me. You might touch their shoulder, and which you feel immediately their arm relaxing more. You may jiggle the wrist a little, you know. You can, if you go like this up in the air and you drop it, it may not be conducive to trance. You know, it would be a bit of a shock.
A bit of a jarring moment for them.
It would. And so So you would just, so you can just do a variation of that.
Mm.
And what about on Zoom that you can't do that? Now, it's interesting, Dr. Bruce Eimer, working with self-hypnosis and pain and chronic pain, he actually adapted something where the client was doing the hand drop on themselves. That's a possibility you could play with.
Mm.
Your imagination is all part of this. You could do anything, really. And it's a process. So just thinking about the different parts of it, you fractionated them, which was putting them further into, rising their attention, and then bringing them back down, rising, bringing it down. And that's a whole discussion on what Dave called it, not fractionation. He called it 3 trips to Bernheim. So the arm drop in the original, when Larry first learned it, he learned it the way Dave did it in stage, with a rigid arm. And he actually did it with, whoops, now you can see me, with the hands straight out to the fingertips, which is, in a way, it's relaxing instead of rigid, creating that rigidity, but also Jason Lynette was doing, I think it was a stage show, and he looked out and there was a whole audience going like this. He goes, yeah, that's not good. So in a way that only Jason Lynette could say, if you could imagine, yeah, that's not good. So what are we going to do now? And so he then had them tightening their fist. Okay. And when they tighten their fist, they get that rigidity, and I have it tighten it when it's down and bring their arm up, from the shoulder, and go ahead and make that fist and get it tight. It gets tight in the wrist. As you comes up, the tightness and goes into the elbow, into the shoulder, as if there's a bar of steel going through your arm. Now, I can't always see, if I tell them, go ahead and try to bend it, and the more you try, the more you cannot. Go ahead and try to bend it. And sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And the other thing is lifting his arm. He just wants to come up there. Hey, baby, hold on one second.
My shoulder won't allow me to do that.
Come here, baby. This is Tuffy, everyone.
Oh.
Tuffy, baby. Yeah, one-eyed wonder. If you bring that, can you bring that right up against you, that chair?
I can, but
yeah, just bring it close, and he just wants to be closer to you. There you go. You want to go in? There you go. He has to be right here.
I have a cat that does similar. So
yeah, and so I've recently started to have them take their own hand and push down on it, and it either springs back up or they find they can't move it, and so whichever it is, you go with it, and it just springs right up, and then have them bring it down slowly. And the reason being, again, you don't want to be jarring it, and use that as a deepener. And as it comes down back to your lap or the chair, you find you go even deeper than before.
Do you notice something about all the things she said? And that is, regardless of what their action or reply is, you word your next thing to make that a positive. Whether it's a case of, and you feel it spring back up, or whether it's you're saying, and you couldn't push it down. I don't care which one they do, you grab a sentence that makes that a positive on the idea that this whole thing is a process. Each step is a test, convincer, and deepener combined, and each step leads to the next step. So it's simply a case of watching what their reaction was and rewording what your next sentence would be so that you've made it a positive. Because every positive deepens them.
So in the post-pandemic world, when you can actually be with a client and be close to them and maybe lift their hand, you can find that when I forgot where I was going to go with this. And I was like,
Make
oh
use
my
of it,
God.
make use of
It's
it.
so, it's
Started
so
dreaming off into
wonderful.
the post-pandemic world, I'm sure.
Oh, I know what it was. So, when they're helping you and they're anticipating you lifting this hand, I just reach across and lift the other one, and which they're not expecting. And you can feel
Great
the relaxation
idea.
in the body the way it really is when they're not manipulating it.
Mhm.
So that's always a good little one too.
That's
In the days
fantastic.
that we can touch, in the days that we can be in the same place, and in this post-pandemic world,
Mm.
and so, but having all these other ways of doing it is only giving the hypnotist, even when they're training now and going through and practicing the ways to do it online, can only help them
Mm.
when they're actually doing it in person.
Whenever I've been doing it in person, if I notice the person's helping me, I tend to do the little shake and
Right,
offer the suggestion of, you can relax, just let go, relax
right.
even further. And that often gets them to the point where they will just let go in that moment. So,
Yep. And then of course, Dave Elman had two sayings that worked real well in learning this. One is in everything he does, expect it to happen, make it happen, especially when we get to the numbers, and watch it happen. So that's one of them. And the other thing when he was teaching was don't bring me your successes. Bring me your failures, because then we can work on that. And so isn't that what we're all talking about today?
mm,
How do you gain your confidence? By doing it. By doing it. Each person's going to be different. You might adapt it differently. I personally have never strictly memorized the script.
no, and I don't feel there needs to be either. I think you get the general gist of what you're aiming for, and
That's
you
Right.
know that you go from process to process through.
Right.
It's one of the beautiful things about, because I think many trainings, they generally tend to do a progressive muscle relaxation as the introduction, induction. And again, while it doesn't need to have a script, I know many people that will sit there with a script in front of them, reading word for word as if the magic is in the words, and completely not
Right.
tuning in on what's happening right in front of them. Whereas the
Being
beauty of
client
this induction
centered.
is you're doing it with the person. You're there with them.
Right. Being client centered,
Mm,
working off the client and
yes.
vice versa. And they feel that.
Mm,
And there are people that are script readers that are not real good readers. And that, I remember a student I had years ago, and we exchanged. I did some hypnosis on him, and he was doing some on me, and he was not a good reader. And I was so aware of it, in fact, that I'd been a teacher for years also. But I was very aware of it. And so if you are reading scripts and you're a really good reader where you're just looking and you could also see your client or pull pieces of it. I did learn my lesson though. I always like to have a something on my clipboard, because one day my mind just went away, for how you just go off somewhere, and I couldn't for the life of me bring myself back. I couldn't. And the more I tried to think of something to say, the more I couldn't say
more
something.
distant it became. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, and this was like 10 years ago. I said, is this what Alzheimer's is like? Just reaching, and not finding. And I rescheduled the client. And after that, I always have something on my clipboard, usually like an ego strengthening script,
Hmm.
because you can't go wrong. You can just go and pull a sentence from there, and then you're back off and running. You don't have to be there anymore. It just puts some words in your mouth, and then you get your rhythm and you're going back to it. And so now we have all the physical relaxation we need. Let's look at the mental relaxation.
Can I say, I actually did a training recently where we went back to the Almond Induction, and this was the part that I think scared the most people. And it even got to the point where I raced down to my clinic room, which is in the same building, and got my copy of Dave Elman's book and came upstairs, and we found the wording that he used to introduce this particular bit. Not that we're fascinated on scripts, but it was just that we felt so many people seemed to be confused or concerned about this particular
How do
part.
you transition?
Mm,
How do you transition is the basic question.
Right. And it's not about losing the numbers.
Mm.
It's amnesia by suggestion.
Mm.
So there's, I think a lot of people, I've heard things like, well, if they're analytical, they're not going to lose the numbers. Well, Larry went to MIT, and there couldn't be more analytical people, and Larry's analytical. He was also Dave Elman's play toy. So, oh my God, you do an Elman on him, he's going into Esdale, and it's like getting him back up is not always easy. So he really sucks at being my client from hell. Where I'm going through and doing what we're doing, and instead of going through the whole thing demoing, and I want them to stop, so we go on and talk, and then we do another part. Can't get. I'd have to go like this to him to get him to go. Oh, sorry, honey. To have him come up. He's got a sore shoulder.
It's on camera too. We've got it. So.
By the way, Lawrence, when you just said that you had to go down to your office before you came back up, it brought back to my memory that we were going to be teaching up there with you before this pandemic started, wildfires and the pandemic. And I was so looking forward to coming up and teaching on that rooftop of yours.
It'll be 2022, 2023, something along those lines. I'm sure you're always welcome to Australia.
So now we're up to the numbers. In a moment, we're going to go for mental relaxation. Okay. So in a moment, I'm going to have you count backwards from 100, slowly and out loud. And when you do, you'll find that with each number, you will double that sensation of relaxation and going deeper. And a funny thing's going to happen. Maybe the time you get to 97 or perhaps 96, you'll find they just fade away. Just let it happen, and it will happen. And you will have the most wonderful feeling of mental relaxation. So there's your setup. And then you have them start counting slowly. Now, when I have added in, and this I learned from Jason Lynette, to make it a little less direct or authoritative than originally. If you notice the word perhaps as much as, that takes away some of the threat for that person that's like, I don't know, am I 10 times deeper? I don't know. Is that 10 times? So it takes away that internal conversation by perhaps, as much. So it gives them a range, of whatever it's going to be. Same thing with the numbers, perhaps doubling that sense. Just let it fade away. And then you have them start counting slowly, as slowly and out loud. And as they count, you start to, if they go too fast, you say, and take a deep breath and double that relaxation. So you might guide them to slow down. And if you slow your voice down to match their breathing as you're giving the directions, because the rest of it I do in my regular speaking voice, right? I don't do the slow, monotone, hypnotic voice. It makes me crazy. But you know what I mean?
Yes.
But you slow it down for the numbers, and then you start to listen for different things. Number one, are they speaking softer? Are they slowing down? Then, as they get to 98 and getting ready to let them go, and let them be gone. Okay. And so you can let them keep counting. And if they continue counting, that's right. You're doing fine. I usually stop them by the time they get to about 92 and do one of my little failsafes. Number one, if you have the contact, you can have them put all the rest of them or any parts of them, noticing I'm no longer using the word number, and just put them here on that arm. And as I lift my arm and plops back down, just let them disperse and be gone. That's one. Okay. Not as conducive right now for online or in groups. Instead, you would have them go ahead and just imagine this little white cloud coming along and take any parts of them or any of them that are left, put them on there. And then depending on the client, if they're a golfer, just go ahead and just let it sail off down the fairway, off into the horizon behind a tree, or, giving them some direction if they're at the beach, or just push that. If it's a group, just go ahead and push that cloud away and let it float away, and noticing whenever they're gone, go ahead and nod your head. If I'm in a group, I have them raise their hand, because otherwise I'm like this. Did they nod their head? Did they? So I just have them raise their hand. Some people think they've raised their hand and they didn't, and that's okay. When it's about in a group, if I have them and they're about, I used to go, are they gone? And all of a sudden they'd start counting on, are they gone? So just saying, nod your head when they're gone gives them the time to do whatever they need to do and get rid of it. It's on them. This is something we're doing together. If they're not, I say I will tell them, well, let your conscious mind continue counting as your subconscious mind continues listening to the sound of my voice. And so you're just separating, because it's the subconscious mind you want to work with anyway. So you give the conscious mind that task, let it do it. They'll stop counting eventually. I've had a hypnotist once say to me, I'm counting the numbers, but they don't lose them. Well, yeah, if you're counting them, they're not going to lose them. It's not going to happen. And it's not, it's not in their best interest to go all the way to zero. That's not it either. So the idea is, this is like a 3 to 5 minute induction. Dave Elman taught them at the end to be just 1 minute, because remember, doctors were using that. The reason they loved Elman is they had patients to see, and they only had a certain amount of time to spend with each patient. So if they could get somebody into trance in 1 to 3 minutes, that was great, So that would be how to get rid of the numbers. Now, does it have to be numbers? No. Let's say somebody's not comfortable with numbers. Well, what about doing the days of the week backwards? Most people could do that. It doesn't take a lot of conscious effort. You can visualize that calendar and go backwards. And maybe at the sound of the cuckoo clock, you're just going to let them be gone. No. That's Larry's cell phone reminders. But I would use it if it ended up happening. And then what about if the months of the year? Most people could probably, without a lot of conscious effort, December, November, October, you could visualize it. I've had people say, count the alphabet backwards. That I'd have to go forward a lot to get to the next letter and back.
I can do that one.
I would struggle with that one.
I was in a Dave Snyder class, and he put that out there as part of the induction. And so I don't know what he said next. I said, I'm going to work on this. And I actually visualized the alphabet over the blackboard when I was in, 3rd or 4th grade. They had it up above the blackboard, and back before there were whiteboards, we had blackboard and chalks, and I visualized it and went backwards. But it kept my mind focused on that, and not whatever he was saying next. The next juicy thing he did, I lost it because it was too much conscious effort. The average person, usually I would have to go forward to do back. So that's something to consider. And those are just some of the ways of doing it. But there is step 6, which we've added. So let's say that this is the line here of somnambulism. And as you breathe, you go up and down, and you're popping in and out, of somnambulism. So by doing additional deepener, you're going down here. And so now as you breathe, you're going to be lower. But I put deepeners in throughout the process. Then I also have little things, let's say they go too deep and you don't know if they're listening to you. So you also have some techniques to bring them up a little. So I hope that helped build your confidence in different things you could do with the Almond.
There were so many incredible suggestions there, which, I use the Elman often. It's one of my absolute go-to inductions. And there were things there that I had not thought of. So I'm really grateful on a personal level there, just for some of the suggestions you had.
Good.
I don't doubt anyone listening to this. I know that a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are people who are learning hypnosis at the moment. I think this is going to be really valuable for them. I think also what's going to be really valuable for them is your upcoming conference.
Absolutely.
Larry was saying before, there's been the last couple of months of extremely long days that you've been working, Cheryl, to put this together. Can you tell us a little bit about what we should expect and how people can join in and get involved?
Sure. So we're going to have 3 rooms of speakers for 3 days for 12 hours, so that everywhere people get in for quite a few hours, so even our keynotes, we scheduled one at 11 in the morning, so even the West Coast could do it without getting it up at 6 in the morning. We have one at 5 in the evening, so there's 2 a day. There's 6 wonderful keynote speakers. So in Australia, it's going to be, or at least on your coast, it would be 7 in the morning, and New Zealand will be 9 in the morning. And so, and it goes till 9 o'clock. So there's, some hours there that you can get. Starts at 9 o'clock in the morning. You can probably get a few hours before going to bed, because if you're like me, sometimes you're up till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. But there are great speakers. A lot of top headliners talking about a lot of clinical and medical, interventions, or how to use hypnosis, and some business ones. So it's for regression. Often at a conference, you might get one regression talk and maybe none. Well, there's 4 different ones, different types of regression. You have Justine Lett from New Zealand.
New Zealand,
talking
yes,
about,
lovely Justine.
yes, and you've got Roy Hunter
Mhm.
talking about it, and 2 more, which now I've been working, I don't even remember what all the things are.
When you've got 90, you're allowed to occasionally category.
Yeah, there's 1 or 2 there. Yeah.
We have Anthony Jockwin speaking, who's going to talk about 108 things that he's pulled out of the Elman book that were meaningful to him and his development in hypnosis. You have and those 90 some odd speakers are coming from 20 plus countries. You have
a really exciting event. Yeah.
Ken Guzzo on smoking.
Mhm.
You have Andrew Hardwick from New Zealand speaking. You have Lance Baker.
Yep.
You have also from Australia, Pamela O'Leary,
Mhm.
talking, who was actually in our Brisbane class years ago. There are dentists. There are there's a dental panel with 4 different people on it. There's 3 different stage hypnotists. You have Don Spencer, who is a very famous hypnotist. I think he did, what was it, 360 weeks without closing a show.
Wow.
Consecutive weeks.
Jeez.
Pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
And also all 3 of them are not only stage hypnotists, but they're also clinicians and how they use it. You have Rich Guzzi and you have Michael DeShalit, and I know Michael's been in Australia. Yeah. You have a doctor from the Amazon, from Brazil, who goes up the Amazon and does hypnosis, because there's big suicide rates and depression in the rainforest communities and along the river, and they bring hypnosis to those communities to help them. We have, now I'm getting too small print here. This doesn't have the speakers on it. I have all over the place. We have Beryl Komar. We have Hans Rudy Whiff, Sheila Granger from the UK. We have Jason Lynette speaking, Sean Michael Andrews, all different topics. And especially if you are a newbie, and besides the fact, I want to tell you, you're never a newbie. You bring all your experience, all your rapport building, all the things, your communication skills from things you've done in the past come into this with you. And you'll find that you will tap into that regularly. It's not like you have to reinvent the wheel. You know, that stuff's all there within you, and you'll find that will just flow out of you. Eugene Popa. There's just so many great speakers that you would want to hear. And what we've done is also we are videotaping and audio, the whole thing. So not only do you get all of those for the price of coming to the conference, $247, if you, before the conference begins, if you sign up before then for $99, this is US dollars, not Australian, not New Zealand. I know I went through that recently. This is US dollars. And for $99 more, you get all of those hours. I mean, 90 some odd talks.
That's
plus
pretty
panel.
remarkable.
And that's
get the recordings is what she's saying.
Right. You get them all. And so that's a heck of a library on such a wide variety of topics. So check it out. We would love to see you there.
When is it happening? That's the one thing I think we haven't mentioned so far.
June 11th, 12th, and 13th, right around the corner.
Right around the corner. We'll make sure that there's links around this video as well, so that if anyone's interested, they can do that. I'll also make sure to place a link to your website as well, because I know there's a lot of other training opportunities and training options that exist on your website that people should really explore.
Right. And the recordings to the conference will be available, but probably for more than it would cost you to go to the conference and get the recording, that, you know, in pre-sale. At the conference, it will go up $100. So also there are payments plans. So you can put down 40%, and then in 30 days and 60 days, put down the other 30 and 30. So I've tried to make it so it's good. And, you know, so that more people can come. You know what the other thing is, Lawrence? It's not just sitting. It's not webinars. It's Zoom rooms. So you see other people, you get to know people. There's also going to be a hospitality, or we call it the social hall. It's meeting people in the hallways, you know, and talking to them.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
And networking. So we're going to have that. People can go to and meet up with each other. Sometimes there might be a planned talk. Presenters will be in there. And then taking it one step further, I really still missed going to the restaurant with our friends, meeting up for lunch or dinner. And we didn't put breaks in because everybody's at different breaks. So it's just continuous and you do what you want. But we're going to have the Dave Elman Virtual Cafe. And people can go in and take their group into a breakout room.
What a great idea.
Isn't that cool?
I was thinking with even with the hallway area, I could have a cocktail here and just be standing there socializing with people. My cocktail as I wait between classes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Or, you know, or just being absolutely. And by the way, I am looking for a few good people that are comfortable putting people in and out of breakout rooms to help do that. So, and I know your Emma Romano is going to be the host in the social hall. It's such a Emma thing, right?
I hope that there's a filter on language that happens with.
Yeah. So 5 from 5 p.m. my time, or everything's in Eastern, to 9 o'clock our time. So she will for 5 hours. 9. I think she starts at, maybe it's even at 4 4 or 5. I think she's starting at 4. So 4 o'clock, getting up at 6 in the morning, your time. And from 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock, she will be on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If everything goes right, she plans on hosting that. So you can go in and even if you're new, that she will get you talking to people and introduce you to people.
She's a remarkable lady, our Emma Romano, to say the least.
Yes. So so that's the conference. We hope to see you there. And make sure to stop us and say hi.
Absolutely will. Absolutely will. For the time being, though, I should let you go because I'm not quite sure what time it is in the US at the moment for you. It must be getting late.
It is 9:12, and my next appointment's at 9:30.
Right. Okay. Well, in that case, I will let you go. But thank you so much for just this opportunity to have a chat with you and to be able to contribute towards my podcast and to learn a lot more about your upcoming conference. I'll thank you very much. I'll let you guys go. Have a wonderful evening where you are. And I look forward to seeing you at the conference.